Hello and welcome to Upstage Downstage.
With me, Richard Platt, seated in the upper circle.
And me, Stephen Rees, seated in a cheap seat. This is the Theatre Podcast, where we discuss productions we've seen, things we've liked and may not have liked, giving our complete unprofessional and non-biased opinions.
So grab a brew, take a seat and let's raise that curtain.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing Jeckyll and Hyde. We saw this production at Derby Theatre on the 30th of September 2022. Derby Theatre and Queen's Theatre Hornchurch joined forces to bring Robert Louis Stevenson's extraordinary and iconic tale, Jeckyll and Hyde, to the stage in a thrilling new adaptation by acclaimed playwright Neil Bartlett. So Richard, what's it all about?
Dr. Jeckyll makes a momentous scientific discovery, spinning him into a double life in which inner demons threaten to take control. In the streets of Victorian London, respectability is mixed with murder as his two identities begin to blur.
But first, our post-show opinion!
A mysteriously atmospheric and captivating ride.
Spooky, sublime storytelling.
So with all that said, let's
Set the scene!
So Richard, would you like to describe the set for me, please?
Yeah, so when you walked in to Derby Theatre, you were basically shown and presented with a old, what can only be described as a medical theatre. For you had basically a semicircle of raised platforms with railings and steps, which was basically to show the old operating theatres where people would have watched people being dissected and people having operations and things.
Yeah.
Because in those days it was a something to do. It was progressive medical science that people watched in those days. So when we talk about theatres or medical theatres, this is what they created on stage, really, to show that that's how it was set.
So a viewing platform to watch the anatomy of the body.
Yeah. Basically,
being undone.
Yeah. Even if the patient was either alive or dead, it was one or the. And at front of the stage, you had clamshells that were covering the lights to show that it was actually
set in Victorian times.
Victorian time production, which just to give that illusion. And all you had above was three lights hanging. And I will say that these weren't swinging, which was actually quite nice for once in a theatre.
In the Derby Theatre, yeah. In fact, they look like they come from Habitat. I wouldn't mind them in my dining room, to be honest. They'd work really nice.
Well. Almost like over a pool table.
Yes.
But also on stage there was just simply a trolley and a table and some chairs dotted around that you knew would probably be used throughout the production.
Yeah, and a desk on stage, right?
Yeah. So basically it was all very lit in a dank, dark way with smoke bellowing out, and just to almost take you back to that Victorian era, that time when there was no TV around and things like that. Everything was. It just felt...
Well, it gave the impression of a gothic atmosphere.
Yeah, definitely.
And to lead you into the psychology of it all, I suppose. And
it almost feels like it was under a microscope, or you could tell that we were going to go down the maybe medical route, because in a way...
Well, they were in a way because they were analysing the story.
Yeah.
They were... dissecting the story.
Yeah, they were.
They would be in that
space.
In that space, yeah, with the bodies anyway. But yeah, they were depicting who did what, who trampled who or whom.
Yeah.
And are you actually familiar with this story? Because I've seen the Hammer horror film, and I have not actually got around to reading.
Yeah, I've not read the actual story. I've got the idea of the actual premise of Jeckyll and Hyde, and I've seen different imitations of that character or that type of production.
I've seen another production which showed one side. Basically, it was we saw the same show, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, but you saw him actually, Dr. Jeckyll changed to Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
And going through the effects of what the potion did to him.
Yeah, it was more set in his lab and felt, there was a lot more towards the actual seeing inside.
Yeah, and I can't remember the story of this girl being trampled on, or the other things that
it
they
focused
were
more
reenacting.
on Jeckyll and Hyde rather than the actual the side stories, maybe.
So this was a strange one viewing this, because I was learning a bit more about the actual story, because it's gone right back to the actual novel itself.
Yeah.
This adaptation.
It felt like it gone back to
adaptation.
the roots of the actual
What the story is.
yeah. And because it was almost, it gave you more about intrigue and filling in the gaps with this story rather than going for the big bold statements of performance. It wasn't overdone, and I think that was the difference with this, you know.
Well, that's it. Because it has that gothic horror feel to it. That is why it ended up being a Hammer horror film.
Yeah.
For that particular genre.
Yeah,
shall
of
we
course.
say.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's that kind of story, like Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Mary Shelley. You know. It's in that vein of
like Dracula. It's got that
gothic
sort of
horror
feel of that
almost
you will fill in. You know, you don't necessarily need to see all the wrongdoings that person's done, but merely talking about them is enough in some ways.
Yeah, and also about good versus evil.
Yeah.
One part of you is good and the other part is evil, or like the monster within comes out.
Yeah, and how evil can sometimes take over and engulf as well.
So, in terms of the direction with this, it was directed by Sarah Brigham. And what did you feel? What did you think about it?
I mean, personally, I thought it was a really good, fresh take on the story.
Yes.
I think because we've seen so many, you've probably seen so many cliches, or there's been so many times where it's done in a predictable manner, where it's more about the characters actually changing from Jeckyll to Hyde and things like that, where this was almost like you were being told the story and you were painting the picture. You know, they were telling a story and you were seeing those places because they didn't really have a lot on stage to paint those pictures. It was a very grey, dank set that you were then thinking about what was happening off the stage, really, in a way.
I think this is where the story element and the adaptation comes into its forefront here, because it owns this. I mean, she's done brilliantly with creating the drama within the space.
Yeah, definitely.
She's recreating those scenes and retelling those stories. So I was a bit like at first, are we going to explore them going outside and doing this, that and the other? And obviously I was used to the other version that I'd seen. Yeah. So this, because they'd brought the outside in and retold everything, I was then captivated by it all, because it allowed, she allowed the actors to then double upon roles and be expressive with certain situations and either do certain dance moves or be in like complete agony or torment, or being mysterious at the back, these unidentified bodies, as well as being their own characters within the scene as well.
And it also felt like they were almost street performers, wandering minstrels.
It very much
Mummers plays from years gone by, where they'd rock up in a space and just tell a story, and they'd run about and do different people and different characters, and
I suppose just it's that whole point of just reenacting a scene, isn't it? Really,
but committing to that, and I think that's what it was. That's the way it was directed. Was it had that feel of that nobody didn't do a different character, or there was simple moments where somebody become a child instantly, or somebody become so many Jekylls or so many Hydes on stage that it just enhanced the performance. And I think it showed that there's a bit of Jeckyll and Hyde in everybody a little bit sometimes, and I think that was key.
Yeah, I think the transitions as well from one scene to the next, although you don't really notice there's a scene change.
Yeah, there wasn't actually.
It just evolves. I suppose that's the kind of word. It just evolves from one story to the next, because they're progressing each time, and they just the actors just moved about on stage just naturally, like flowing water.
Yeah, there was no blackouts in between
up the stairs or down, and
there was no stop starts. It was literally one whole piece of the only blackouts that happened were for a specific point, not scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. They were literally, it was like you say, it was just a blend of, it was a journey. I mean,
but also it's when the actors aren't necessarily pivotal to that particular storytelling moment of the scene. They were like props at the background, or just like overbearing, looking over, giving a bit more mystery.
They were watching what was happening, so their eyes were following the performance down below. So even if you looked at them, they like you say, they were overbearing, but they were almost taking watch over the production.
They were, because in a way it's like say murder mystery. It's they're trying to wrap their brains as to what's gone on, the actual storyline, And so they're trying to work it out and follow it along themselves. So in a way they are.
And also
watching.
to show those people that would pay to watch a dissection happen on stage and you know, in that medical theatre, it gave you those moments. They were giving levels of performance just by simply physically being in different spaces. I think that
they're watching the sort of body of the text unfold, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And you know,
cut to pieces.
There's a lot of metaphorical sort of things when you step back and realise what's actually happening.
There is a lot in this, and I think you can tell from the way the set is, because they didn't have to have the set like this.
No, not at all.
It could have just been the home.
Yeah, it could have.
But to have it in that kind of dissecting thing, I think that evokes a lot of themes.
Yes, definitely.
About...
well, it almost strips away the space
play.
to create its own space, and it's just a different take. I think you expect. I think I expected, like you say, the house or the lab or those moments of that you see in Hammer horrors or you see in those cliched.
But they brought in a lot of mystery as well.
Yes, they did.
It wasn't just like the murder. I'm obsessed with that. It wasn't just like the mystery of the box.
No.
And them getting in like a magic show.
Yeah.
They also touched upon those kind of elements of being like the greatest showman.
Yeah.
On certain aspects.
Yeah, definitely.
Of it Virgin almost like a weird version of tap dance, but it wasn't a tap dance.
No.
It was like just the way they moved or acted.
It was orchestrated and
it just moved around with canes.
Yeah.
In sort of a stylistic approach.
Yeah, definitely.
To showing the breakdown of someone going insane from being in one particular scene where they're, I suppose, tap dancing in a way, but they weren't tap dancing. They were just like dancing to something.
It was almost a vaudeville performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it sort of transpired that they were actually trampling over the person.
Yeah.
Each one of them were just like murdering.
They were all the hides.
It's like the anger was coming out in all of them.
Yeah, because it was showing that's
the rage of
the rage, but also these people that go insane, they're enjoying what they're doing, and that's what they were showing. That there's sometimes in this horrible, horrific murder, actually Hyde was enjoying that moment, and then it's only till afterwards, and that can come out in dance, and that's what they did. They did it like a performance of it's almost like the Joker. It's that uncontrollable smile on somebody's face, and then only afterwards, when the realisation of what they've actually done is mutilated a body, is actually afterwards when they realise, when Jeckyll comes back, that he's realised how bad he's actually, and I think that from a direction point of view, I think it was very confident to take the risk of do something in this way, because there's nowhere to hide.
Yes.
Cliche. There's nowhere to hide.
God. Can't believe I missed that.
What were you going to say, sorry?
You'll be hiding in a minute. But yes, I think normal theatre goers will take something from this.
Yeah, they will.
But I think it's, like you say, it probably is a bit of a risk. But if you've got a passion and you understand it and you really want to do it, you can see here that more thought has gone behind understanding the themes and drawing those out and thinking about every movement. Not just the set, it's the lighting, the sound effects. How can I tell this story?
It's all got to be part of it.
Yeah. And
I think when I mention risk, also what I mean is...
Well, you've got to think about the risk of the paying audience.
Yeah, but not just that.
Well.
The risk as well is more, if somebody in the cast doesn't commit to this, it won't work. This performance, because it's so bare stage, even though they've got things around them, if there's no commitment to telling the stories the way they did, it would feel flat and it would feel empty very quickly. And I think that was key to the pace and the performance of it as a team of actors.
Yeah, well, exactly. I agree there, because we've seen some plays where it felt like the actors weren't clued up or they weren't on...
They're not holding the stage.
Level. Yeah, exactly. They're just not particularly bothered or doing something half. But also, I'd say, in terms of if it wasn't directed well as it could have just gone top. But also, if it was that bad, then the audience would actually react.
Yeah, definitely.
And they either wouldn't come back for the second act, or it would be like bad word of mouth. Yeah. So, as this is the first night that we saw it, I think it did really, really well.
Yeah, I did, and I thought that from a direction perspective, it was done in such a way. Sarah did such a thing where the minute those lights came up, it was whack, we're off.
Yeah.
It was like we're not stopping now.
I tell you something.
Until the interval.
It was as if the set was electrified.
Yeah, it was. It was like all of a sudden,
that's what it was.
like off we go. There's a surge, and we're going to do this, and then right the way through.
Yeah.
And we aren't going to stop. And there was some nuances. There was nice moments. There was happy moments. There was sad moments, and the pace was right. I felt for this.
It gave you a mixed bag of everything.
Yeah, it did. It did.
It wasn't like self-indulgent either.
No. And I didn't lose focus. You felt stuck watching it. You just, I think you just wanted to see where it went, really.
And I wonder sometimes, is that like when it came to the magical scene where they tried to have a bit of comedy in there and be a bit like prankish and stuff like that. I do wonder if that was a bit too much or a bit strange, because it felt like I didn't want to laugh.
I know.
I wasn't finding any of it funny.
I felt like it took the audience by surprise, but not in the best way, because you were so fixed in the performance. You weren't really...
You weren't set up for it to be anything funny at all either.
No, not at all.
That was just an odd thing. But then it did actually feel right.
Oh, yeah, it felt right.
But I think it was maybe too much trying to add humour into a place where it probably just wasn't needed.
I think the audience maybe weren't prepared, like you say, for reacting to that, because it was like, well, hang on a minute.
Yeah, because there hadn't been any comedy or...
No. No, because
stuff before.
The main character, I mean, in a way, Jeckyll and Hyde, yes, he is the main character. However, in this, the female doctor was almost the narrator throughout this. She was the one that almost glued it all together. Yeah. And I think that... Oh, him and the solicitor. Yeah, as well. And the solicitor as well, yeah. But I think those were the two that they'd spent more time on. Well, they're the ones trying to unpick the story, aren't they? Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, it was just... I like the stylistic aspect of it. Me too. And that kind of thing, because it makes it a little bit more interesting to watch, because people aren't just playing the one character, they're playing a character, but then just being a part of the set. It just shows their versatility and just presence, knowing how to be on stage but freely perform. And I think that's the key to this. It was like it's adding layers and textures of acting. Totally. It wasn't, because there's a lot of productions out there where you have principal cast, and for me this was an ensemble piece where everybody committed to each role and they all did it, and equally they were all important. There was no real... A bit like Brief Encounter that Same principle, really. And I think that's, in essence, that's similar to the way this was done in a way, because that was, it's pretty much bare stage with a few props. What do you think about the writing, the actual text, the script of it? I thought it was good. I thought it was captivating, and I thought it was a script that would stand up on its own, even if you heard it as a radio play. I got a feeling that would work well. Absolutely. Because of the same reasons, it hit you hard. It was straight in, off we go, and I think... There was no build-up, but you didn't need that, because throughout the production there was little bits that were filling in gaps. So you almost started midpoint through the whole Jeckyll and Hyde storyline, but throughout then things started being unravelled, and you started seeing all the things that were happening, almost like you were reading a newspaper and catching up on what happened, and it felt like that. I think it would take someone, if someone was to approach this and to direct it, I think it might be one where they probably just put it back because they wouldn't know what to do. Yeah. So I think it just takes someone with a lot of imagination and passion to direct it extremely well. And I think this is I can't find the right word, to be honest, but maybe phenomenal is probably sounding a bit too naff. But it's true. It's and I think from a writing perspective, it's just hard to find the word. I think from a writing perspective, Neil Bartlett, who wrote this, you can almost see that he dissected the story when he wrote the script. You can see that he's took the good story and stood back from it and gone, he's almost laid it out. You can see that he's laid it out and pieced it together in such a way that translate really well on stage. And I think that was key to this, because then the director has got, like you say, it would have been a lot to direct, because there's so many scenes in it. And if somebody had approached it in a traditional method or a traditional theatre method, they'd have been throwing set at it, they'd have been throwing this at it, they'd have been throwing that at it, and it just wouldn't translate like this one did. Now, do you know what we're here for? No, Stephen, what are we here for? We're here for the drama. I must admit, I felt all the cast gave a tremendously strong and invigorating performance.
straight from the get-go.
Yeah,
Straight out the gate, it was just the vocals were on point. You could hear them.
Yeah.
They never like fluffed or dropped
No,
a
and I
line
think
or anything like that.
It was clever use of microphones. I mean, it's not really a technical. It sort of is, but they just reinforced their voices so it sounded clear and concise. So it didn't actually get in the way. I think it's very difficult to pick anyone out when they all performed as a team, and this is very much what this performance was, because you didn't really see Jeckyll and Hyde happen much. You didn't really see those transitions until later on. It was all about the build-up and the storytelling about what he'd done. And
well, the whole thing is like it's supposed to be like a mystery. The only thing that it has going against it is the fact that everybody knows the play.
Yeah,
they know
exactly.
it's a person with a split personality, basically.
I think for me, nipping back to the directing, something that also we didn't really mention is Jeckyll and Hyde. Jeckyll was stood at the top of the seating, the blocks at the back of the stage for the first 20 minutes, and he never really reacted. There was no sign of him being Jeckyll and Hyde on stage, but he was always there. You could see him all the time. And it was almost like you were waiting for that moment because it was building you up, because you didn't know when it was going to happen. You know, but he was physically there, waiting for his moment and his time, because that's, in a way, what he did.
And the costumes were really well made.
Yeah,
and I
they were
felt
brilliant.
they looked the part, definitely.
Yeah. And they were all subdued and almost matched the set, matched everything around. They were sharp. They were of the time. There was little clever bits where there was a couple of costume changes, but not many. And I mean, little things like Mrs. Poole and Matron. She was the same character, but you didn't really notice the change. But you knew that she'd changed her accent a little bit or changed her manner. So when she was in the hospital,
there were subtle changes in quite a lot of them.
There was. Enough to know that it's a different person.
Yeah, and each of them gave an energetic performance.
Yeah, definitely.
I think they all had a bit to shine.
Yes.
Each one of them, they took it in turns.
There was no bit part in this. Everybody had.
They all had a little bit to say and do and react to. Some had more than others, but they each in turn got to have something.
Yeah, I mean, total showcase of their performance ability, because this is something that highlights how much they could all do. And I think, if anybody was watching in the audience that might have an idea for somebody for something else, it was great for that, because you could see what they were capable of.
Yeah, and you don't have any stand-up performances, I suppose.
I mean, I'd like to say
great performances. So.
I mean, they all gave great performances. I mean, Polly Lister as Dr. Stevenson, I think she was the glue in the performance, but I just think she was just solid throughout. She never faltered from what I could gather, and I just thought she was great.
Yeah, I'd agree with her, and also Robert Vernon. Yeah, he gave a mesmerising performance. You just glued to him and everything he did. He was very strong.
I think Stephen was in awe.
I was. Moving on to our next segment.
What the tack is this?
I must say, Richard, this production, I noticed straight away that there was eerie music going on just as we were taken to our seats.
Yeah.
I did at one point think they were playing like a musical version of Bjork or something.
Yeah.
There was that kind of.
It was a subdued music that
it just
sat
a
in the
string
background.
version of one of her earlier albums or something. It was quite cool. But then, as it went on, it had all sorts of music.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I mean, it wasn't like a jukebox or stuff.
No.
But like spooky or eerie,
almost
getting the
broken
atmosphere.
down vaudeville. It was a really weird sort of.
I don't know what that means, so I'm not quite sure. But it definitely had there must have been some kind of stop music.
I think with using
those atmospheres.
Yeah, I don't know if I think it was more like, because some of the songs they used in it were really old.
Like the London
songs,
one.
London one,
There was
stuff
that
like
one.
that, and
But they only had that one though, didn't they?
Yeah, but I think they used it in a way that it was almost like they used really simple melodies that sounded good and did the work. I mean, technically, the one thing I mentioned about the set is, like we've seen with a few other productions,
the sound, because they had the sound effects of like the horse and cart outside. And
they had subtleties in sound effects that were just enough to reinforce where the space was or what they were doing. Or
I felt this had a lot of supportive sound effects.
Yeah, it was a lot of atmospherics
and
things in the background.
I noticed a lot of it,
just to enhance the almost rumblings of what was happening, or to add to the madness, as it were, to add to the split personality, and
and even the weird kind of noises when a character changed in terms of like the personality
Yeah.
change, that there was a bit of a an odd jingle or a bit like a weird. It's as if they've
Yeah, it
just
was
been,
almost nondescript, but it was very
it's as if they've just been in
worth
the
it,
BBC Radiophonic Workshop and
Yeah.
just nicked a couple of like old stock Doctor Who monsters, sort of a weird.
Yeah, and then
music
somebody's wobbling a
stuff.
saw and or running, just making some random noises, and yeah, it worked.
Wobbling a saw.
Saw, yeah, when they do make it, it's that eerie noise when you
Does
run
it?
it. Yeah, you can run a violin bow over it, and it makes really
Over a
weird.
saw.
Yeah,
More like a high pitched strings thing. Fair
Yeah.
enough. Right, on to the lighting then. What do you think? Because I thought it had good shadows.
I thought it was really good. I mean, one
good
thing,
lighting.
yeah, it was really good
Casting
lighting.
the shadows.
One thing I do like to mention is on the rails that were for the raised platform areas. What was really clever is they hid LED strips in those. So wherever the cast stood watching over the actual performance when they weren't actually doing anything, their faces were lit from below, so it gave that eerie, spooky look to their faces, that they were just there as part of that, and it just added a little bit more to
And
it.
I quite liked when things were verging on coming towards the interval and
Yeah.
getting a bit frightened. They had sort of like a power cut, and I think it was coming up towards the interval
Yeah.
anyway. And they actually turned the lights on in the auditorium
Yeah.
to then turn it back off again.
Yeah.
Because it flowed up and down.
It was
like
when
the
it was
energy
when
and
yeah
the
it was when
things were changing, and
Jeckyll
then
turned
they got
into Hyde and towards the and
lamps.
it was like his surges of brain energy was changing everything happening in the room, and yeah, I think it was just lit in a way that it felt in the moment. And there was the odd use where in the second half they had one scene where it was lit with lanterns, and it worked really well because it was just it was actually to detract from the fact that Jeckyll was changing into Hyde at one point, and they were just using it as a distraction technique, but it worked really well because they were. I think it's very good when they light a set. When you've got a black stage and everything's dark, even the smallest light source can make it look really good on people's faces and things without relying on loads of other light. I think that's really clever.
Now, for this other technical thing, there was like a magic box where a character got in, and then there was another character, and it's like disappeared.
Yeah.
Now, Richard,
How did they do that?
do you know? Was there a trapdoor?
There wasn't a trap door.
Was there like a
I did see the
another fake backing?
There was actually a blind covering the first door with the knocker on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was already something that was set up, and I have a feeling that the other door was the red door was covered with the wood that you can see on the stage when you actually see the actual picture. And also one thing I'd like to bring up at this point when we talk about that door, there was loads of other hidden compartments on the stage. So there was doors, there was connection, there was like
cupboards,
there was cupboards, but there was also a really slim box where they hid newspapers in. So when they brought out the newspapers, they were pulling them out of the stage, and there was thin boxes made just for those to be housed in, so that you couldn't see them until they were needed. And I thought that was really clever.
Yeah, there wasn't much backstage other than the scientific apparatus, and also the hospital bed and hospital gown.
Oh, so one thing I will say is they used the hospital bed in the right way compared to another production where we've seen where they didn't necessarily do that. I mean, they one other thing that was quite good, which was a bit of a special trick, was they had mixing powders to actually make the potions on stage to create different coloured potion when it was being made, and it went from...
I thought the yellow was turmeric.
It went yellow... Yeah, I thought it was, but it went from yellow to green, and then when they put the pipette in it, it went red, and the actual potion that he drank went red, and it was just showing different... I just thought it was really clever.
Well, that was because the actual... what do you call it? Pipette? Is that what... Yeah, it was already in there, and they just dropped it into clear water, so it went red. Right, what part of this would you rewatch? Rewind and rewatch?
I personally would rewatch it all because I just thought it was a great performance. I think it's hard to pick out a scene.
I think I quite like Mrs. Paul's scene when she did sort of like a bit of a monologue, in a way.
Yeah.
That was quite nice. It reminded me a bit of Hilda Ogden in a way, the way she was...
Yeah, I remember which one you mean. That was really good, that was.
Yeah.
Almost split personality herself because she was reading this thing... and then answering herself, and she was telling a story on her own.
It was as if 1 minute she was like just trying to be like a sister, in terms of like a nurse, and then next she just ended up being like the local gossip in the shop, basically.
Yeah.
But it was just quite a nice, down to earth scene. But
Yeah.
but I mean, there was a lot to revisit.
Yeah, there was.
To be honest, I liked a lot of the movements and stuff, but I can't think back as to which particular scene that was. So I'll just rewatch the Mrs. Paul's.
Yeah.
Now for our verdict. Scores on the doors now, please, for Jeckyll and Hyde, with 10 being the perfect personal potion, and 1 being a strange case of evil urges. What's it going to be?
Well, I think it deserves a 10 out of 10, just because it never stopped, and I've seen so many other productions where they don't focus on the story or the direction, and it feels like a damp, wet lettuce, and I think this is just, it was great.
I'm going to give it an 8. I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not. It was a great production.
Yeah.
Great acting. Everything was just gorgeous, to be honest. But I suppose it's just down to the actual story. I'm not bowled over by the actual the content of the play itself, which has got nothing to do with what we saw, really.
Yeah.
So, what sound effect will you be choosing from the following? A complete train wreck, tumbleweed, an audible shrug of the shoulders, a slow clap, a pleasant applause, or a standing ovation. What will it be?
I'll give it a standing ovation for the sheer effort and the sheer performance, really.
And I'm going to give it a pleasant applause. So there we are. That's our discussion of Jeckyll and Hyde. We hope you found it insightful.
If not, entertaining.
Coming up over the next few episodes, we will be discussing Accidental Death of an Anarchist,
The Wicked Lady,
and Mousetrap. That's it for this week, folks.
If you'd like to drop us a message, please email us at upstagedowstagepod@gmail.com. Remember, you can always join in the chat to share with us your views on a production.
Also, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you get every episode the second it's released. And we hope you join us again for another instalment of Upstage Downstage.